so much for signing up and coming to this today. Steve.
Great. Thank you. So, just a little bit about my background. I studied as a young child, almost 10 years, with a jazz and classical guitarist. That is the full extent of my musical training. But this training, my teacher was one of the finest teachers, probably the finest teacher in the Detroit area. And she held my nose to the grindstone, so I absolutely learned a ton more about music than just playing guitar. So I see a bunch of guitar cases around. This is fabulous. After training at age 15, as a way to hang out with older kids and meet girls, I started playing in a folk group, and my brother had actually preceded me in starting with this group. He played for about 2 months before I received a phone call. I was 15 years old, received a phone call from the leader saying, "Would you like to come and play?" And so I did. About a month later, my brother quit, and 43 years later, I left the community for this position in Silver Spring. The last 23 years, I was full-time music director as a guitarist. And so Ensemble, I have been a part of Ensemble music making for the entire time. Started as the folk group. I mean, that was language we used way back years and years ago. Now we use contemporary ensemble as replacement lingo. So what we'd like to do today, what I'd like to do today, is to give us a little bit of background. Start with giving a little bit of background about what our bishops tell us, what our church tells us about what is music, what is this music making in parish ministry all about. Then very quickly look at some guidelines of sorts to remember, and then to actually go hands-on here and do some demonstrating, some work in bringing you up, giving you a chance to actually play and to comment about how our playing changes with the different combination of instruments. So that's kind of a scope for what this is going to look like. Let me ask a couple questions. How many of us here are guitarists? Hands on. Okay, so we've got a great number of guitarists. That's great. How many are keyboard players? Oh my gosh. So many of you guitarists are also keyboard players. That's great. Any flautists or woodwinds? Okay, good. Percussion players? Any? Okay, did we bring any of our toys? Any bass guitar? Okay, that's good. Wow, we'll be able to do a lot. So before we dig in, before we get started, let's start with prayer. I came across this prayer the other day, and boy, it became my mantra for that day. So if we can put ourselves in a perfect place. Lord, when I feel like I'm drowning in my work and responsibilities, in my fears and anxiety, in my worries, doubts, and troubles, drowning in my loss, my loneliness, and grief, in myself and in my passions, in my confusion and my foolishness, drowning in my sins and in my failures, and in my sorrow and my hopelessness. When I feel like I'm drowning, remind me that you're always there, Lord, that you see me in the depths, that you reach down and take my hand to draw me up and out, until I break the surface, and your Spirit breathes in me until I breathe again in hope to live another day. Remind me, Lord, that you walk the waters of my life and will not let me perish. That you rescue me and pull me from the depths when I am sinking. That you save me from myself. Remind me that you'll never forget me, never abandon me, never let me slip beyond your grasp, but that your hand will hold me fast and pull me free of danger till I rest, secure and safe, in you, my Lord, my Savior. So our bishops produced a document for us back a number of years ago. It was one of the documents that was a part of the Vatican II documents. The Constitution on the Sacred Liturgy gave us help for understanding what this new liturgy was all about. But Music in Catholic Worship was information that helped us as musicians learn about what is it that we're asked to do, what is our task, what is our role. And so years after those documents were created, there was a new document called Sing to the Lord, Music in Divine Worship. How many of you are familiar with this document, or this book? That's fabulous. How many of you have actually read it from cover to cover? Okay. I have, I've read it a number of times. Mine is a little bit marked up and breaking a little bit in the middle. This is a great, great document for us because it really clearly presents to us what is it that we as music ministry are called to in our parishes, in our communities. And it helps us sift through what it is that we think we're called to and what it is that we really are called to. We can get lost in our own interpretations, our own thoughts and ideas. And this helps us clarify. This kind of brings us back home of sorts. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to share just a couple of articles that pertain to, number one, what is this music making that we do? But then get into some of what this book talks about instruments. I'm always amazed at something new that I glean from this book. It's almost like scripture when you go to it and, yeah, you've read that Gospel of John a number of times, but you read it again and something new comes out of it. It's the same thing here. This is full of just great, great information. So let me start with some of the kind of setting the stage for what music ministry is. This comes from Article 5, and it says, "This common sung expression of faith within liturgical celebrations strengthens our faith when it grows weak and draws us into the divinely inspired voice of the Church at prayer. Faith grows when it is well expressed in celebration. Good celebrations can foster and nourish faith. Poor celebrations may weaken it. Good music makes the liturgical prayers of the Christian community more alive and fervent so that everyone can praise and beseech the triune God more powerfully, more intensely, and more effectively." More intently, not intensely. Right off the bat, we're learning that what we do is not fluff. What we do goes so far beyond ourselves. And when we start talking about faith, and building faith, think about how, I'll think about myself even. 43 years in music ministry, planning music for those 43 years that our community sung. how many generations were affected by those musical decisions? 3, 4, 5, over those 43 years. Think about how many times you walk out of church, or those around us walk out of church singing that closing song. Or you find yourself in the middle of Sunday afternoon and you've got that prep song, preparation to gift song in your mind, or the psalm is going through your mind. Weeks after liturgies, we will most often remember songs that were done versus homilies that were given. I mean, think about that. Think about the impact. So our ministry is one that builds faith and helps faith to grow. So we can't approach this lightly because of the power that lies behind what it is that we are called to in music ministry. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. I'm going to jump around. There's all kinds of information in here about planning music, how we go about selecting music, the roles of different instrumentalists, the layout of the Mass from beginning to end. There's tons of good information in here, but I'm gonna skip through. I'm gonna go to what's spoken of about the choir, the role of the choir in the liturgy. The choir must not minimize the musical participation of the faithful. It's in the very first article, Article 28, that talks about choirs. Choirs are not about themselves. Choirs are about, first and foremost, helping communities sing. So our desire for that great choral 4-part harmony sound that we really like, while there is a place for it in liturgy, our primary responsibility is that of helping our communities sing. And even as flautists or guitarists or keyboard players, the primary responsibility is not to create a fantastic sound for our own fun or edification. It is to create a sound that creates a foundation for the community to join in and sing to. What that may mean is that there's times when we don't play what we want to play. Or if there are 4 guitars in the ministry, sometimes the best choice on a particular song is that 1 or 2 of those guitars lay out, they not play. Or that the best thing that a guitarist can play on a given song on chord changes is a simple upstroke on a chord and just letting that chord ring. These are things that we're going to be exploring in just a bit. When we start doing some hands-on work, we're going to be looking at what gives the best foundation for the community to respond to. That is always what we're going to come back to. Okay? Now, this document does go on to talk about how there is a place for choirs singing by themselves, and what parts of the liturgy the choir is best suited to join the voice of the congregation, and where are those places that it can participate by entering or bringing the community in by entering into the song without them singing, but entering in through listening and prayer. So, great information in here about choirs. Let's go on. There is one particular one. There is the book takes a turn here and starts talking about instruments. This is Article 86. In fact, let me ask this question before we begin. What do you think is the number one most important instrument in music making in our communities? Number one most important instrument? Yeah, wow. Absolutely, the human voice. That is the most important one. Wait a minute, I thought my guitar was the most important. I need more volume out of my instrument because that's the most, or no, the piano is, of course, because they need to hear the pulse and the pace and the key of the song and hear their melody line, or the organ. No, the organ is, because the organ gives that, especially right-hand support to their voice. We need to be thinking exactly what you just came back with. The voice is primary. It's number one. And everything we do is in support of the sound of the voice. If the community itself cannot hear themselves, if they can't get a sense of their own voice in the mix musically, they're going to shut down. They're not going to sing, no matter how good of a guitar player you are. Talks about other instruments. Article 87 talks about the accorded pride of place for what instrument? What's the accorded pride of place instrument? Among all other instruments which are suitable for divine worship, this instrument is accorded pride of place. What instrument would that be? Organ. Organ. Yep. However, it does not say organ is the only instrument. It comes back and says Article 88 talks a little more about the organ, but in 89 it says, however, from the days of the Ark of the Covenant, when the Ark of the Covenant was accompanied in procession by cymbals, harps, lyres, and trumpets, God's people have in various periods used a variety of musical instruments to sing praise. Each of these instruments, born of the culture and the traditions of a particular people, has given voice to a wide variety of forms and styles through which Christ's faithful continue to join their voices to his perfect song of praise upon the cross. So, even though organ is or has a pride of place, other instruments absolutely suitable. And this is kind of hedging us and leading us to think that the traditions and the cultures influence this in a very deep way. Think about the Hispanic culture and any experience that you've had in Hispanic liturgy. You have a lot of guitars, and it's a completely different experience compared to that of our organ and cantor masses. So there's great information in here, tons of information for us to root us, to ground us, to really help us understand what it is that we do in music ministry. So I would really encourage you to go for it, this book. If you've read it, it's been a while, pull it back out, thumb through it. Just one note on this topic before we move on. Last night I referred to the topic of style wars, musical wars. That, I mean, it sometimes feels like warfare because of the depth of passion or commitment that we hold to different styles. Reading through, if you were to read through the three judgments, the musical judgment, liturgical judgment, pastoral judgment, for selecting music, nowhere does it talk about a style as being the style. You're not going to find that supported by the bishops in this document. You may hear it supported by different priests, but you're not going to hear. That's not what this document leads us to. These three judgments in choosing liturgical music for our worship in the Catholic Church leaves great room for a diverse musical style. And if you think about it, those who gather on Sunday, if we were to evaluate or judge what is their music of choice, I bet you would find a wide range of colors on our canvas every single place you go. I challenge you to keep that in mind as you move forward in your work of music ministry. I'm not saying to give up that part that serves you best. I'm not saying that it doesn't belong. I'm just saying, if we're really honest, we need to, if we're honest in our music making, if we're authentic in our work of ministry, we must be mindful of the whole breadth of styles of music that's out there. So, okay, let's get away from this really, really high academic thing and move into more of the practical work of actually working with ensemble music making. There are two books that I want to point out to you before we really dive into this. The first is called Liturgical Ensemble Basics. It's a book put out by OCP. And within here, you will find a lot of good information about different parts of ensemble music making. A lot of good direction in this book. Marty Haugen has a book out. I'm not sure. Tom, do you remember what the name of his is? I don't either. But if all you have to do is go to GIA, Marty Haugen, ensemble music making, or throw in something like that, and you will get the title and the resource. And he's rewriting his resource as we speak. He did a, boy, I wish I could remember the name of it. He's redoing it, and so look for some really good things to be coming back out from him regarding ensemble music making. Something that we're really not going to dive into a whole lot today, but that greatly affects the music making that goes on in our communities, is that part of the ensemble music making, or choir singing, or music program stuff from head to toe, is the stuff that doesn't happen while we're singing or playing. It's the stuff that happens during rehearsals, or the stuff that happens after rehearsals, or the stuff that happens when two people are talking about a third and doing some triangling, and there's conflict that's unresolved, and all of those managerial things that come into play. There's a book that I put together back a couple years ago called Managing Music Ministry. And it really delves deep into kind of the perspective of what is good leadership? What are those ways of dealing with conflict, dealing with tough members? What's communication? What good skills are there that we can employ? Servant leadership breaks open. What is servant leadership all about? Just some real practical stuff and some real good encouragement for how to deal with those things that have a great influence on our music making, but are not the fun things necessarily, the strumming or the singing or the harmony making. Those things, if there's conflict that exists in your ensemble that's not challenged or not dealt with, your music making is not going to be all that it can be. And it can be a real hindrance to the Spirit's work within your ministry. So that's all I'm going to say about that. This is kind of like a whole semester's worth of information getting thrown at you. So there's enough reading for you for the next few weeks. Let's take a moment. I'm going to pass out a handout that is just a basic handout that I want to review a few things on. I don't want to go through it head to toe because you can read through it, and it offers a lot of good info.